Welcome, listeners, to the Monthly Show about the scary, the spooky, and the supernatural. Get ready for the more.
Greetings, fiends, and welcome to this month's topic of Friday the 13th and all that is associated with the date. It's a long-standing superstition in Western culture that the day is unlucky, and some people think bad things could happen when it comes around. To begin with, the fear of the number 13 is known as triskaidekaphobia, a specific phobia that can manifest as intense anxiety or panic when encountering the number 13. The fear is often linked to superstition. No one really knows where the superstition came from, but both the number 13 and Friday have a long history of bringing bad luck. It's the combination of the two that makes the day the most feared. The special word for fear of Friday the 13th is paraskaidekaphobia, but more on that later. It is believed that some people think the reason why the number 13th itself is thought to be a bad luck comes from several sources, such as the Bible, which, during the Last Supper, the presence of 13 people at Jesus' Last Supper, with the 13th being Judas, the betrayer, is a frequent association. Then there's the Norse myth of about 12 gods having a dinner party in Valhalla. The trickster god Loki, who was not invited, arrived as the 13th guest and arranged for Hodur, the god of darkness, to shoot Baldur, the god of joy and gladness, with a mistletoe-tipped arrow. Baldur died, triggering much suffering in the world, which caused the number 13 to be considered unlucky. Well, on Friday, October 13th, 1307, the arrest of the King's Templar was ordered by Philippe IV of France. While the number 13 was considered unlucky, Friday the 13th was not considered unlucky at the time. Tarot card games have been attested since at least around 1450 with the Visconti Sforza Tarot. One of the trump cards in tarot represents death and is numbered 13th in several variants. Since at least 1774, a superstition of 13 at a table has been documented. The origin of the superstition is unclear, and various theories of its source have been presented over the years. Apollo 13 was launched on April 11th, 1970 at 1300 hours, 13 minutes, and 0 seconds Central Standard Time, and suffered an oxygen tank explosion on October 13th, although that was not a Friday, at 2100 hours, 7 minutes, and 53 seconds Central Standard Time, forcing it to abort its mission to land on the moon. All crew returned safely to Earth on April 17th. That may have been a factor that led to the renaming that prevented a mission called STS-13. STS-41G was the name of the 13th space shuttle flight. However, originally ST-41C was the mission originally numbered ST-13. STS-41C was the 11th orbital flight of this space shuttle program. The 13th level is a destination and a level of a multi-building that has often omitted in countries where the number 13th is considered unlucky. Omitting the 13th floor may take a variety of forms. The most common including devoting what would otherwise be considered the 13th floor as level 14, giving the 13th floor an alternate designation such as 12A or M, the 13th letter of the Latin alphabet, or closing the 13th floor to public occupancy or access, by example, designating as a mechanical floor. Reasons for omitting the 13th floor is usually on the part of the building's owner or builder, or a desire by the building's owner or landlords to prevent problems that may arise with superstitious tenants, occupants, or customers. In 2002, based on an internal review of records, the company Otis Elevators estimated that 85% of its buildings with at least 13 floors with Otis brand elevators allegedly did not have a floor named the 13th. Early tall building designers feared a fire on the 13th floor or feared tenants' superstitions about the rumor decided to omit having a 13th floor listed on their elevators. Vancouver city planners have banned the practice of skipping 4s and 13s since it would lead to mistakes by first responders, for example, going to the wrong floor. Even some airlines also choose to skip a row 13 in their planes too. On top of all that, for hundreds of years, Fridays has been considered the unluckiest day of the week. There are some stories in the Bible where bad things happen on Fridays, like the day the Great Flood began, and some people believe that is the day Adam and Eve committed the first sin. In Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, written back in the 1300s, he says, quote, "And on a Friday fell all the mischance." In Britain, Friday was also known as Hangman's Day, because it was usually when people who had been committed to death would be hanged. But Good Friday, the day Jesus Christ's crucifixion, is thought to be the only Friday that bucks this trend, hence its name. This is particularly so in maritime circles. Perhaps the most enduring sailing superstition is that it's unlucky to begin a voyage on a Friday, but would sometimes begin a long voyage on a Good Friday because of its holy connections. The combination of Friday and the number 13th as a day of particular bad luck seems to be a relative recent tradition, perhaps only about 200 years old. It was first written about it in an article in a French literary magazine in 1834, 191 years ago, where it states, quote, "It was Friday, and under the number 13th, that brings bad luck." Also in France, Friday the 13th might have been associated with misfortune as early as the first half of the 19th century. A character in an 1834 play, Les Finesses de Gribouille, states, quote, "I was born on a Friday, December 13th, 1813, from which comes all of my misfortunes." An early documented reference in English occurs in H.S. Edwards' biography of Giochichi Rossini, who died on February 13th of November 1968. Quote, "Rossini was surrounded to the last by admiring friends, and if that be true, like so many Italians, he regarded Friday as an unlucky day and 13th as an unlucky number. It is remarkable that on Friday the 13th of November he passed away." This fear might have a closer link to suspicion than the working definitions of specific phobias. The Diagnostic and Statistics Manual of Mental Health Disorders, 5th edition text revision, trusted sources defines a specific phobia as an irrational fear of a particular object or situation that far exceeds the realistic level of dangers that the trigger poses. The resulting fear or efforts to avoid the fear are usually enough to cause significant distress or social, occupational, or functional difficulties. According to a 2014 review in PubMed Central, people more often categorize transdicophobia as a superstition or a form of magical thinking, which involves the linking of two entities that do not actually connect in natural law. That being said, according to the Stress Management Center and Phobia Institute in Asheville, North Carolina, an estimated 17 to 21 million people in the United States alone are affected by the fear of Friday the 13th, making it the most feared day and date in history. Some people are so paralyzed by fear that they avoid their normal routines in doing business, taking flights, or even getting out of bed. It has been estimated that $800 to $900 million US is lost in business on that day. Despite this, representatives of several different airlines have stated that their airlines do not suffer from any notable drop in travel on those Fridays. In Finland, a consortium of governmental and non-governmental organizations led by the Ministry of Social Affairs and Health promotes the National Accident Day to raise awareness about automotive safety, which always falls on a Friday the 13th. The event is coordinated by the Finnish Red Cross and has been held since 1995. A study by Lubin, Scallon, and Singleton in 1993 attracted attention from popular science literature as it concluded that the risk of hospital admissions as a result of transport accidents may be increased by as much as 52% on the 13th. However, the authors clearly state that the numbers of emissions from accidents are too small to allow meaningful analysis. Subsequent studies have disproved any correlation between Friday the 13th and the rate of the accidents. On June 12, 2008, the Dutch Study for Insurance Statistics stated to the contrary that fewer accidents and reports of fire and theft occur when the 13th of the month falls on a Friday than on other Fridays, because people are preventatively more careful or just stay home. Statistically speaking, driving is slightly safer on Friday the 13th, at least in the Netherlands. Dutch insurers received reports of the average of 7,800 traffic accidents each Friday, but the average figure when the 13th fell on a Friday was just 7,500. There's at least one Friday the 13th every year, with some years seeing as many as 3. Common years that begin on Thursday have 3 Friday the 13ths in February, March, and November, such as 2009, 2015, and next year's 2026. Leap years that begin on Sunday, such as 2012 and 2040, also have 3 Friday the 13ths in January, April, and July. In 2025, there was only one Friday the 13th in June. Now this leads us towards the popular pop culture influences of the dreaded date. Of course, there is the infamous franchise of the non-stoppable Jason Voorhees with the movies, whereas the original story started around the date of the 13th day of the month that had just happened to be a Friday. They eventually progressed into storytelling centered around the infamous killer and less about the date itself. The film titles include Friday the 13th, released on May 9th, 1980, directed by Sean S. Cunningham. Friday the 13th Part 2, released on May 1st, 1981, directed by Steve Miner. Friday the 13th Part 3, released on August 13th, 1982, directed by Steve Miner again. Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter, released on April 13th, 1984, by director Joseph Zito. Friday the 13th, The New Beginning, was released on March 22nd, 1985, by Danny Steineman. Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives, released on August 1st, 1986, directed by Tom McLaughlin. Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood, was released on May 13th, 1988, directed by John Carl Buechler. Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, was released on July 28th, 1989, directed by Rob Hedden. Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday, was released on August 13th, 1993, directed by Adam Marcus. Jason X was released on April 26, 2002, directed by James Isaac. Freddy vs. Jason was released on August 15th, 2003, directed by Ronnie Yu. Friday the 13th was released on February 13th, 2009, directed by Marcus Nispel. Top of movies, it also had a couple of television appearances. Friday the 13th, the series, is a TV series that ran for 3 seasons with 73 episodes from October 3rd, 1987 to May 26, 1990. Originally, the series was to be titled The 13th Hour, but producer Frank Mancuso Jr. found it would turn away viewers and instead took the name Friday the 13th to deliberately draw in audiences. Despite the title, the series has no connection to the film series of the same name. An antiques dealer named Louis Vendredi, played by R.G. Armstrong, Vendredi means Friday in French, has made a deal with the devil to sell cursed objects out of his shop, Vendredi's Antiques, in exchange for wealth, magic powers, and immortality. In the show's first episode, he tries to in the show's first episode, tired of being merely an obedient puppet for the devil, Louis rebels against the devil and breaks the deal, resulting in him being killed and having his soul claimed by the devil. After Louis's death, the shop is inherited by his niece, Mickey Foster, played by Louise Roby, credited without her first name as Roby, and her cousin, Ryan Dallion, played by John D. LeMay, later to play the role of Steve Freeman in Jason Goes to Hell: The Final Friday. They decide not to keep the store and sell off many of the cursed objects before being stopped by Jack Marshak, played by Chris Wiggins. Jack was Lewis's childhood friend, a retired stage magician, world traveler, and occultism expert who originally collected many of the antiques for the store before they became cursed. The series follows the protagonists as they hunt down the cursed objects, which are usually in the possession of people who have discovered their magic powers or are unwilling to give them up. Since the cursed objects are completely indestructible, they must be locked away in the antiques store vault, designed to magically render the objects inert. A manifest written by Lewis holds the records for all of the cursed objects sold by him. And when it comes to television series, we should definitely not forget to mention Crystal Lake is an upcoming American slasher television series developed by Brad Caleb Kane and produced by A24 that is based on the Friday the 13th film franchise. It serves as a prequel to Friday the 13th from 1980 and stars Linda Cardellini as the leading role of Pamela Voorhees, with Callum Vincent as young Jason Voorhees. In April 2025, Brad Caleb Kane, the series showrunner, posted an episode of an episode's production script and said the series production offices had opened. In May, interior sets were under construction. Under the shooting title Mama's Boy, principal photography commenced in New Jersey on June 20th, 2025. Scenes were shot in Jersey City and West Milford. Filming of interiors and exteriors shot at Rutt's Hut in Clifford took place on August 1st to 8th. Production later moved to Camp Nobibisco in Blairstown, the same camp location the town used in the original film. Filming is expected to end in October. And as popular 80s and 90s movies usually spawn video games, this franchise is no exception. Friday the 13th, the computer game, is the first game adaptation based on the film of the same name. It was released in 1986 by Domark for the Astrid CPC, Commodore 64, and the ZX Spectrum. The game was released on floppy diskettes and cassette tape. The player's goal is to find and kill Jason while making sure their friends or themselves are not killed by Jason. Friday the 13th is a video game developed by Atulus and published by LJN for the Nintendo Entertainment System in February of 1989. Based on the horror franchise of the same name, players control counselors at Camp Crystal Lake as they attempt to defeat Jason Voorhees. The game received general and negative reviews, with criticism centered on its high difficulty and poor gameplay. Friday the 13th, the game, is a 2017. It's a survival horror game developed by Ilphonic and published by Gun Media. It is based on the Friday the 13th franchise. The game was released on May 26, 2017 as a digital release, and later released on October 13th, 2017 as a physical release for PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. A Nintendo Switch version was released on August 13th, 2019. As of January 1st, 2025, the game no longer is playable online, and all player progressions are no longer accessible, leaving players stuck at level 0, which has broke the game. A rumored sequel is currently in development. So that being said, we are going to wrap up this particular episode, but don't you fret. Every month has a 13th, and we'll be there next time for another topic for you to sink your teeth into. Goodbye, ghouls! You've just been listening to 13 Pods of Horror, a Planet Geek production. Please be sure to download, subscribe, share, rate, and review. You can buy us a coffee at ko-fi.com/PlanetGeekPod. Interact on all of our social medias by searching for Planet Geek Productions or Planet Geek Pod. You can also email us directly at planetgeekpod@gmail.com. Thank you once again for listening in, and see you next time.